Welcome to Our Highest Work, a podcast where we share the best ideas in spiritually based business and career success, and where we're building an online community of wise and loving mutual support. As of this recording, we're just beginning to build that community. If you'd like to join us and be one of the first active members there, I welcome you to go to ourhighestwork.com/community, or just go to ourhighestwork.com and click community. It's all free. The community is free. This podcast is free, so I welcome you to engage, and I look forward to seeing you there. So my name is George Cow. I'm excited about today's episode, episode 8, where we're going to be talking about overcoming procrastination and creating joyful productivity. The quote that I like to start with today is from one of my productivity heroes, and he's also one of my business heroes. His name is Babauta. His website is zenhabits.net. I'll put this information in the episode comments page. But the quote I want to share that's from him is this: simplicity boils down to 2 steps. Identify the essential and eliminate the rest. So I'll say that again. Simplicity boils down to 2 steps. Identify the essential, eliminate the rest. So why are we talking about overcoming procrastination today? Well, I hope that that's the fact that you're here means you're interested in being more effective and able to do the things that you had planned to do, the things that you intend to do to make your life better. And a question I always like to ask is, what is the life that you want to be living? Bring that to mind now. What is the ideal life that you want to be living? What would you be doing with your life? What kinds of blocks will you have dissolved in your life so that you can live that life with more freedom, with more effectiveness, with more mindfulness, with more joy, with more empowerment? To live into that kind of life, it takes action. It's not just about learning as much as you can. And I think that is one of the pitfalls of people like you and I who both love to learn. One of our pitfalls is sometimes, maybe oftentimes, we subconsciously mistake the learning, the consuming of information, for the doing and the taking action and making actual real changes in our life. There is a real satisfying feeling we get when we learn, right? And unfortunately, that satisfying feeling of learning, of having listened to a podcast, watched a video, maybe even taken notes, right? So there's this satisfaction of learning by consuming information, maybe even taking notes. But we mistake that satisfaction for having actually made real changes to our patterns, or started a new project, or completed a project. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So first of all, learning is a wonderful trait. I wish more people in the world had this trait of this love of learning. Now that we have this trait, let's also build in the love of taking action, the love of making experiments in creating new projects, finishing projects, and managing our patterns. Okay. So before I go on, I hope that you will do me a quick favor by commenting on this podcast episode. I really, really appreciate when I'm able to see what are the things that I share that really resonate with you enough that you want to write them down. And so if you want to join us for the episode page of this podcast, that would be ourhighestwork.com/8 for episode 8. Okay, and I also want to take a moment to thank those who have recently left reviews for this podcast on iTunes. It really makes a difference. Every review on iTunes for this podcast, imagine if you were to leave a review on iTunes for this podcast, you are basically, it's like helping another 10 or 20 people to find this podcast, because every review of this podcast bumps it up in the iTunes charts just a little bit. And there are 45 million, actually I think at this point it's 60 million, if I've read the numbers correctly in the last report that I read. There's somewhere between 45 and 60 million people who regularly use iTunes to listen to podcasts, and they're looking for new podcasts all the time. So every review you write makes an actual difference in the lives of maybe 10 or 20 more other people. So for those who have already left reviews, thank you so much to, I don't know how to pronounce this name, DEDZ, so thank you. Also thank you to Rachel Heslin, Julie Stiles, for most recent reviews. Thank you so, so much. Okay, and now let's go on to the segment of our podcast about the marketing tip. The marketing tip. Today's tip, I want to keep it relatively short because we're going to be, in about 2 episodes, we're going to be starting a series of episodes about authentic marketing. So we're going to be talking a lot about how do we outreach to influencers so that they can find out about our message, our services, our website, and maybe blog that out to their audience, share that on a webinar with their audience, et cetera, et cetera. How do we outreach to influencers? We're going to be talking about utilizing online groups. We'll also be talking about, I'll be sharing with you my entire marketing framework and answering any questions that you have. So in fact, if you have any marketing questions that you'd love for me to cover in the upcoming episodes, please share them with me. You can go to ourhighestwork.com and there's a contact page, or just share them, ask the questions on our episode, any of our episode pages, and I'll be able to see that. But today's marketing tip is very simple. And I'm going to continue on this theme of niche finding, because niche finding is something that all of us do if we want to create our true livelihood. We can't just, if we just sell what's being sold out there, regardless of whether it meets our deepest passions and our greatest strengths, we're not living our true livelihood. On the other hand, if we are only sharing with the world what we think our deepest passions, greatest strengths are, in the way that we naturally share them, and assuming that just by doing that, flocks of people should come to us, we're also not living our true livelihood. What we're doing is we're creating a hobby. So the link between passion and a true livelihood is authentic marketing. And part of authentic marketing, the first part is niche finding, niche clarification. And niche clarification is something that I think all of us should be doing on a yearly basis. I'm constantly doing it in my own mind, like just constantly saying, okay, the way I make niche clarifications is I always tweak something a little bit differently for every program launch, for every time I update my website. I'm like, what have I learned since the last time I updated my website more about my strengths and what is more true for me, and what my audience really values about what I do, right? But so the tip I want to share with you, maybe all those are already tips, but the one tip I was thinking about sharing with you is this: niche clarifying and niche finding. Think of it as dating, okay? Especially when you're trying to figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life, when you're trying to figure out your niche and figure out the next product. Think of it as dating. Just try something out for a little while and see how it goes. And if it doesn't go well, if it's not the right fit, you date the next person. So don't think of niche as, oh my God, I got to find the next product that I launch, the next program that I put out into the world. It's going to be the thing for the rest of my life. That would be too much pressure on anyone before you really have dated that niche, before you've really put the product out there, program out there to see, oh, does the market like it? That's dating. Okay, so think of niche as dating, because you'll learn something with every new date, the person that you date, every new niche that you put out into the market. Hey, what do you think? And you'll tweak it next time. Okay, so I hope that's helpful. Any questions about authentic marketing, niche, anything about authentic marketing, feel free to ask, and then I'll be sure to build the answers into the upcoming episodes. Actually, the very next episode in this podcast is a special one, and I'm really excited. The next episode, I will be interviewing the very author of Constructive Living. So the book that I gave highlights on last time, well, on the next episode, I will be interviewing him live. If you have any questions about constructive living, either based on reading the book or based on watching or listening to the previous episode, episode 7 was my highlights, now is the time to share, especially if you're doing this while I'm recording this and during these couple of days, now is the time to post your questions. And if you post them before the interview, I will be able to do my best to weave your questions into for David K. Reynolds. And even if you're watching this episode long after it's been recorded, you can still post your questions about constructive living in the episode 7 page, and I'm sure I or someone else from this community can share their thoughts with you on what you asked. Okay, so on to today's topic, which is overcoming procrastination and creating joyful productivity. There is so much that I wanted to share with you on this, and I thought that the simplest way for me to do that in this span of this kind of short episode is to give you a little overview framework that you can connect these various ideas to a framework so that it's a bit easier to remember. Okay, and the framework is basically I don't have anything clever to I don't have any clever acronyms unless you can come up with it, but there are basically 5 ideas I want to share with you. Okay. And there's a few exercises or tools under each idea that will make it alive and useful for you. And real quick, the 5 ideas are, and I know just saying these ideas, there's not a lot here, but there's just hear me out, and then you can connect all the things I'm going to say to these 5 ideas. One is commitment. Okay, commitment is key to overcoming procrastination. Second one is distracting yourself less. Distracting yourself less. Remember the quote I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, simplicity boils down to identifying the essential and eliminating the rest, right? So distracting yourself less. Third big idea to share with you today is breaking it down. Breaking it down. Sounds so simple, we learned this in kindergarten or whatever, right? No. Even as adults, we frequently forget to do this. That's why I'll be talking about this. And fourth one is good enough. Good enough. Again, sounds simple, but it's something we keep forgetting to apply in our lives. And when we do, we move forward. And the fifth one is time awareness. Time awareness. Okay, so these are all related. Commitment, distracting yourself less, breaking it down, good enough, and time awareness. So just kind of try to connect what I'm about to share with you to these 5. So I'll kind of go into each one, and I look forward to your thoughts on what I'm about to share. So one is this. So commitment. When we're talking about overcoming procrastination, we're talking about actually moving forward on a project that we either said to someone that we do or that we said to ourselves that we do, right? The problem is a lot of times we haven't actually internally committed to doing the thing. We simply have paid lip service to that particular project. So when it comes to commitment, what I encourage you to do is whatever you are procrastinating on right now, okay, well, first of all, you may want to eliminate the project. Okay? It may not be essential. So because when you're thinking about committing to it, you'll then decide, do I really care enough about this project to commit to it? Okay, so that's really the question to ask yourself. Do I care enough about this project to commit to it? And if so, why? If I do care enough about this project to commit to it, why? Remember, if you remember back in the episode where I talked about managing our patterns, I think that was episode 4, if I had it correctly, where we talked about habit change. And I mentioned that the first question to ask yourself is why. If you aren't doing something, the first question to ask yourself is, why do I even care about doing this? And the more you can get clear about what drives you about doing this thing, or what doesn't. Maybe if you clarify why, you write them down, and those reasons don't compel you enough, drop the project. You don't need more stuff to do. If anything, you need less. But if you write the reasons down, you go, yes, okay, oh my gosh, of course I want to do this project. Then you commit to it. And how do you commit to it? Write down the reasons why. Make those reasons as compelling to you personally as possible. And you may want to say out loud when you're in your own room, without looking crazy, I commit to XYZ project for these reasons. reason 1, reason 2, reason 3. Again, I commit to getting this done. Okay? Otherwise, if you're not committed, no wonder you're procrastinating on it. And to make your commitment even more secure, you may want to put a timeline to that commitment. I commit to completing this project on this date or before for these reasons, because of this, because of that, because of this, because of that. And I'll tell you, I'll give you a little secret of my commitment. Why I keep doing the projects that I do is because I always do my best to announce the project to as many people as I can and when I'm going to deliver it. I announce the thing I want that I'm committed to doing to, and when I'm going to do it to as many people as I can. So you can do this on Facebook if you're so bold as to post on your Facebook timeline. Hello, Facebook friends. I hope you will check in with me on XYZ date because I commit to delivering this project. Now, it might not be something that you deliver publicly, but at least you can say, check in with me. Okay, ask me about it. I find that when I do this, I get it done. I show up. So, for example, this podcast, if I were to treat this podcast as something I pre-record and then deliver to you afterwards, I will probably procrastinate sometimes. But because I tell you that this podcast is going to happen every Tuesday, every Friday, at this time, and I'm going to be recording it literally at this time, I know you're going to show up. Those of you who are watching this live. And that's why I'm so grateful that you actually show up live, because knowing that there's actually some of you right there watching right now makes a world of difference to me. I show up because I know you're watching. So that's how I really solidified my commitment, is to partner with my audience, basically, letting them know when I'm showing up and where I'm showing up, and therefore I make sure I prepare before that, right? Okay, the second principle I mentioned is to distract yourself less. Distract yourself less. Remember, simplicity boils down to 2 steps: identifying the essential, eliminating the rest. The tricky part often is actually eliminating the rest. Identifying the essential, we talked about in the first step. What are you really committed to? That's the essential. Eliminating the rest is a lot harder, actually. So let's talk about this. So let me actually ask you, what is essential for you in completing the project that you are going to work on? When you are working on, so for example, for me, when I'm preparing for this podcast, I need to have my podcast script document open. So I have a general outline of sort of the segments of each podcast, and I need to fill in that outline, right? I have to have that document open, otherwise I can't work on the podcast. I also have a mind map open of sort of my future podcast episodes, so that I know what this podcast is about. So I have those 2 documents open, and I need those 2 documents open. Everything else can be closed. If I have my email open at the time I'm preparing this podcast, if I have my Facebook open, of course I'm going to be distracted. Emails are going to come in. I'm going to be curious I saw that number just grew in my email inbox. Oh, I'm curious what that email is. Oh, my Facebook notification just went up. Oh, now I'm curious, what? Well, who just sent that notification on Facebook? Distract yourself less. So when you are working on the project that you actually want to make progress on, when you're working on that thing, take out the actual document you need to work on that, or whatever tool you need to use, and shut off as many of the other incoming messages, incoming distractions as possible. Another example, if you frequently listen to the radio when you're working, that's fine if you're working on something routine that doesn't require you to be thinking and you're just doing something manually, you listen to the radio, that's great. But when you're trying to work on something that requires your thinking and yet you're listening to the radio, what are you doing? You are draining your energy resources every single minute by trying to think on something and then trying to listen to the radio at the same time. Even subconsciously, it's draining your energy. Or having the television on, or Even having music on that has lyrics, I find is distracting to me when I'm trying to think and work on a project. So when I turn off the music, even if it's music without lyrics, but it's got a good beat or I'm listening to the melody, yeah, I might enjoy it, but it will take me, 2 hours to do something that would have taken me half an hour to do. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. I would rather, okay, if you're having difficulty working on a project because it takes psychological thinking and that's work, right? So that's painful to do work sometimes. You would rather work on it and say, okay, I'm going to turn everything off, but just work on it for 5 minutes. And then after 5 minutes, I can get up and listen to some music that I love, dance around. That's good for you anyway. You move your body. When you move your body, you move your brain. You become more creative afterwards for a little while. You would rather do work for 5 minutes intensively, brainstorm, even if you're looking on a blank screen, just type out whatever it is you stream of consciousness, and then go take a break, have a drink of water, dance around to some music you love, and then come back and do another 5 minutes where you're just typing whatever stream of consciousness is coming to you or trying to answer some questions that'll help you move the project forward. Right? Distract yourself less. So think about the things that have incoming input and shut them off. Close your email, close your Facebook when you're working on the project you don't want to procrastinate on anymore. Okay? You do not need to open them all day long or keep them open all day long. Have specific times when you actually check them. Fewer tabs, same thing. If you've got a bunch of tabs open in your browser, you don't need to keep them all open. I'll show you a real quick trick. Actually, maybe I can do that right here on our screen share. I will do that right now. I will show you a quick screen share. So when you've got a bunch of tabs open, and I'll describe this for those of you who aren't looking at the screen. When you've got a bunch of tabs open, what you can do is click on bookmarks and then click on bookmark all tabs. And click on bookmark all tabs, and I'm just going to put I'm going to put on bookmarks toolbar, put today's date, what is today's, 3/14, and click OK. And that way, okay, I have these bookmarks right here, okay? Right there, and I can right-click on those bookmarks and open all bookmarks when I'm ready to clean them out, or I can click on the bookmark and right-click on any bookmark and click delete when I'm done with that one. So you see, you can bookmark all tabs and then close the rest. So if I wanted to, I'm not going to close them all right now, but you can right-click on any bookmark that you actually, right-click on any tab that you actually need, and then you can click on Close Other Tabs. Once you've bookmarked them all, you can right-click on the tab you actually need and click Close Other Tabs, and that will give you visual simplicity so you can work on a particular project. And in fact, I have this bookmarks toolbar I can get rid of by clicking View and unclicking Always Show Bookmarks Toolbar. So then when I'm clicking on it, working on my script, there's no bookmarks toolbar there. Okay? All right, I'll come back to the my regular person here. I hope that helps, and let me go on to the next principle. And by the way, I'm just going to take a quick look at the screen. I don't see anyone commenting in our Facebook thread at this time for this episode. I do see that Val earlier said that she's loving the podcast, so thank you so much, Val, for your comment there. All right, the next principle. Okay, we talked about commitment, we talked about distracting yourself less, and the third principle is to break it down. To break it down. Chances are, besides not committing to the thing that you want to do, even if you're committed to it, you're finding yourself difficult to do, the chances are you've got the project too big in your head. It's not difficult. It's actually very easy to get this big project in our head. So I invite you, whenever you are procrastinating, take out a blank document, open a blank document, and start writing down all the little steps you can think of that's related to that project. I do this all the time. I open a blank sheet on my computer, and I start typing out all the little steps that are related to this project that I'm procrastinating on. If you don't do that, you're trying to keep this project in your head, and it's too big in your head. Write down the tiny steps. Okay, so write down the tiny steps, all the tiny steps. If there's any particular step that you look at and you feel intimidated by, That means you need to break that step down into even tinier steps. As you're now looking at this list of tiny steps, I invite you now to eliminate any tiny step that isn't really necessary to get the project done. Okay? And then, once you've eliminated any tiny steps you don't need, here's the trick now. Get started on any one of those tiny steps before you move on to anything else that you're doing in your life. Once you've wrote down the tiny steps, get started on any of the tiny steps, even if it takes you 2 minutes to get started on one of the tiny steps. Okay? All right. That was the third principle. The fourth principle is called good enough. You've got to come out with your version 1.0 before you can come out with your version 2.0. The mistake that a lot of procrastinators make is they think that whatever they create has got to be version 15.0. It's got to be that good. No. Anything you end up delivering or creating, even before you deliver it to your client or before you put it online, you've got to finish a draft, right? There's got to be version 0.5 before there's version 1.0. Having it in your head and never putting a draft together, and I would say this, it's not enough just to have drafted something. You should always think in terms of deliverables. Even if it's a draft, always think in terms of what can I deliver to a friend to look at. I always think in terms of deliverables. Because if I don't think of what I can deliver to some other person outside my head to get feedback on, it's still in my head. So the principle of good enough is basically you've got to get version 1.0, what's good enough to get feedback on, before then you can then put together version 2.0 and then to get feedback on. Really, this principle really should be called get feedback every step of the way. Okay? So it's really about getting feedback sooner rather than later. Okay? Remember that you're your own harshest critic. You'll find that again and again, that when you share it with an audience, not just with a friend who knows you so well that she might criticize you on all kinds of fronts, but if you share it with more people, chances are most of those people will say, oh, that was pretty good, because you've had it in your head for so long that you've already been perfecting it along the way. So whatever version 1.0 that you share, version 0.5 that you share, it's probably good enough to get feedback on or even to deliver. Then you can make improvements and put version 2.0 together. Okay? So for example, this episode I'm sharing with you, these 5 productivity principles, is this perfect? Should this be put on a plaque somewhere? No, this is version whatever I'm on. I've taught productivity so many times, but this is just another version. Just another version. Next time you hear me talk about productivity, I'll make this even better, right? So always be delivering to get feedback. Okay, the 5th principle is time awareness. How many times have you lost track of time? Now I know this is a larger habit to build in, but you've got to build into the habit of time awareness. How do you do that? I do this by having a regular alarm, gentle alarm, but on my phone I use an app called Alarmed, A-L-A-R-M-E-D, that works for an iPhone. On Android or other devices, you can just do a Google search or search in your smartphone app market for recurring alarm, and find one where you can customize the sound so that's a bit more pleasant for you. So and for some people, it's they have a clock at where they work where at the top of the hour it chimes. Use those kinds of tools, or gosh, it doesn't even have, you don't have anything fancy like that. My wife got a watch on Amazon for like, I think it was $20 or something like that. And it can, actually no, she got it at Goodwill. We found one at Goodwill, and that was only like $10 and it has a recurring hourly alarm. So find something where you can have an hourly chime of some kind, or whatever recurring period you want, so that you maintain time awareness rather than losing track of time. Now, one of the objections is, well, George, what if I'm in the flow? What if I want to get into a creative state where I'm not so conscious about time pressures? You know what I do? I actually schedule long chunks of time if I need to, so I can get lost in time. In other words, it's fine to be lost in time as long as you have some conscious boundaries between those two. For example, you're not going to get lost in time and work all night, all day, right? That's bad for your health. If you keep doing that, you'll die very quickly, right? And you'll lose your health very quickly. Going with the flow makes sense when you have conscious time boundaries around that going with the flow, around that being lost in time. That's fine. I'm lost in time right now, and I'm already being aware that we're at the half-hour mark, right? If I didn't have time awareness, this episode would be 4 hours. Do you see what I mean? We all need conscious time boundaries within which we can be creative and liberated and lost in time, but we've got to still have time boundaries and have something to bring us back. Okay? So these are all muscles that you're building, and I recommend again to think about them as habits to build in. Each one of these that I talked about really is a habit to build in. Okay. A resource I want to share with you today for more on productivity is actually a podcast episode that I recommended to all my clients. And this podcast episode was the EntreLeadership podcast, where they had David Allen of Getting Things Done. And I'm just doing a quick Google for which podcast number that was. That was episode 66. So if you search EntreLeadership, E-N-T-R-E, Leadership, EntreLeadership, David Allen, 66. You'll find that podcast episode. I highly recommend it. It's about getting things done. And finally, as we end this episode, I actually would love your feedback about this podcast. I haven't consciously asked about that, so I'm asking that of you now. What do you love about the podcast thus far? What should I keep doing? And also, what's one thing I can improve on in my delivery or in what I'm doing about this podcast that would make it even more delightful for you, even more useful for you? I'd be so grateful if you can let me know what's one thing I can improve on and what's one thing I should keep doing. Thank you so much. You can let me know at ourhighestwork.com. Click on community and share your feedback with the whole community. Why not? So that there's going to be some discussion around that, or you can share it with me privately at ourhighestwork.com. So to come back to the quote that I shared at the beginning of the episode, simplicity boils down to 2 steps. Identify the essential, eliminate the rest. I wish you a productive and joyful and peaceful day forward. I look forward to seeing you in the community, and until our next episode, be well and keep your thoughts positive.